slide represents a 3-year trend for the proficiency percentage for the district subgroups in language arts literacy for 6th grade. This is a graphic representation of the district's language arts literacy proficiency percentages compared to the district factor group and the state's percentages. Please note that the percentages for the special education and African American students scoring higher than the DFG in the state, and the economically disadvantaged students scoring higher than the state's economically disadvantaged subgroup. This slide represents the 3-year trend for the proficiency percentage for the district subgroups in language arts literacy in 7th grade. This graphic representation is of the 7th grade language arts literacy proficiency percentages compared to the DFG and the state's percentages. Please note the percentages of the LEP students, African American students, and economically disadvantaged students scored at or higher than the DFG or the state percentages. This is the 3-year trend for the proficiency percentages for the district subgroups in language arts literacy for 8th grade. This is a graphic representation of the 8th grade language arts literacy proficiency percentages compared to the district factor group and the state's percentages. Please note the percentage for the African American, Hispanic, and economically disadvantaged students who scored at or higher than the DFG or the state percentages, and the Asian students who scored higher than the comparable DFG. This is a graphic representation of the 3-year trend of the Scantron school reading scores for the fall of each year. The grades at the right indicate the grade in which the student first took the reading assessment. So for instance, you see the grades on the right-hand side. Each of the clusters represents a different year. The left-hand cluster is 2009, in the middle 2010, then 2011, and the far right is the national percentile. The first blue column on the left is the score when the student first took the test in 2nd grade in 2009. Then in 2010, the blue bar is the second time the student took the test in 2010. And then again, the third bar in 2011, and it shows the progress of the students. What we've seen is that there's growth in the earlier years, and as the scores level off as the student goes up in the higher grade levels. This graph represents the high school AYP trends in language arts literacy from 2006 through 2011. There was a jump in the scores in 2008 and then a drop. The scores are trending upward in all subgroups, except for special ed and Hispanics, which stayed even. This chart represents the district's math AYP data. It shows each school's subgroups and whether or not they attained the benchmarks or safe harbor. The blue shaded areas indicate the subgroups that did not attain the benchmarks. This slide identifies the state benchmarks in math from 2008 through 2013. For example, the benchmarks in 2008 was 66% for 3rd to 5th grade, and from 2011 to 13, the benchmark was 83%. Also, the slide demonstrates Pennsauken's proficiency percentages. The 11th grade numbers down below in the right columns indicate the opportunities to take the HESP, the banking opportunities to take the HESP. This is a graphic representation of the math benchmarks, benchmark scores from 2008 to 10 and from 2011 to 13, compared with the proficiency percentages for 09, 10, and 11. As indicated, although the benchmarks were not met, the scores were trending upward except for grade 3. This slide represents a 3-year trend for the proficiency percentages for the district subgroups in 3rd grade math. This is a comparison among our school's proficiency percentages in math for the total, special education, limited English proficient, and economically disadvantaged subgroups. The district factor in the state's proficiency percentages. Results are varied. Take note, please, to Franklin's LEP students and Roosevelt's total population, special education, and economically disadvantaged percentages compared to the state and the DFGs. This graph represents the school's ethnic subgroups compared to the district factor group and the state scores in 3rd grade math. The results are varied and generally lower than the DFG, and the state, except for Franklin's African American students, Burling's African American and Asian students, Klein's white and Hispanic students, Carson's Asian students, and Roosevelt's total African American, Asian, and Hispanic students. This slide represents the 3-year trend for the proficiency percentage for the district's subgroups in 4th grade math. This is a comparison among our school's proficiency percentages for 4th grade math, the total, special education, limited English proficient, and economically disadvantaged students, and the district factor groups and the state's proficiency percentages. Generally, scores are lower. Please take note that Del Aire's subgroups and Roosevelt's total, LEP, and economically disadvantaged students compared to the district factor group and the state scores. This graph represents the school's ethnic subgroups compared to the district factor group and the state scores in 4th grade math. Although the scores are lower in most cases, the trends for the subgroups again are consistent with the DFG and the state scores. This slide represents a 3-year trend for the proficiency percentage for the district's subgroups in 5th grade math. This graphic representation is of 5th grade math proficiency percentages compared to the district factor group and the state percentages. All subgroups, except for total and white students, scored higher than the district factor group and the state. This slide represents a 3-year trend for the proficiency percentages for the district subgroups in 6th grade math. This is a district representation, a graphic representation of the 6th grade math proficiency percentages compared to the district factor group and the state's percentages. Please take note that all subgroups except for LEP and white students scored higher than the district factor group and the state. And the Asian subgroup scored slightly less than the state. This is a representation of a 3-year trend for the proficiency percentage for the district subgroups in 7th grade math. This is a graphic representation of the 7th grade math proficiency percentages compared to the district factor group and the state percentages. Please take note that special education, African American, Hispanic, economically disadvantaged students